There we go. Okay. And we'll do like this. Like this. Okay. All right. So this is cool. So this chapter is introduces the idea of interleaved practice. And by the way, everybody should own a copy of this. This is my paper copy, but for the notes, I do it on this digital copy. It's an absolutely amazing book. Like Bertie said, each chapter is is mind blowing, as you said. Completely agree, and it really has it's made my practice more satisfying, which has made it more fun. And the more satisfaction, and then the more able we feel like we are to go and do and move and go forward. And so, it's practice better, get more out of it, all that sort of stuff. All right. So, in the last chapter, we got her like really cool schedule. I skipped last week, so there was no book club last week because there was no live stream last week, because I was rehearsing with the Bantam Orchestra for the performances you guys just saw. So I had to be in Manhattan. But this week we're on this about be more consistent in performance. And she's going to tell us about this idea of interleaved practice, which to me, like when I'm trying to comprehend it, and internalize it and retain it, to me, it seems like it does the same thing as flashcards do. So with flashcards, you are like, if we're doing the times tables, or learning the vocabulary for an anatomy test or literature or grammar, whatever. We're gonna be quizzing ourselves like, okay, what's that? Define this one, or what's 8 times 7 or whatever. And then goes back in another one, and you're supposed to, like my friend Kenny who teaches school, he's like, you're supposed to, the ones you miss, you're supposed to set aside in another pile. And then he had this like metric for, I wish I could have remembered it. I should hit him up again, but for how often you're supposed to, go through those again, the one that you missed, and the ones that you still miss, then you put in another pile, and then those become like what you need to go back over again. And so it's about this kind of a random encounter of asking the brain to call up information. So we're going to get there, and by the end of this chapter, she's going to tell us really strategic ways to do this. And to implement this. Before we get there, she's going to introduce the idea of interleaved practice and studies and what it does and how it's different than blocked practice. So let's get right into it. So she starts off with the beginning of this chapter. She tells a story about a student who was playing great at home, really nailing his Bach stuff. But when he came to perform it, like, okay, he's there with his teacher, who's Dr. Molly Gebrian. She says, play it for me, and it just doesn't go right. He messes it up. And it's happening again and again, and she doesn't, and he doesn't understand what's going on. So as she says, she's at the end of this little section, she goes, okay, kind of the third time it happened, I realized what we needed to do, and we need to get him doing interleaved practice. So at the end of the chapter, she'll bring back this story about the student again. So the idea is, how do you get things ready for performance, right? Because that's what she's talking about, how to be more consistent in performance. And this is a chapter that I would have benefited from reading before the Guy Kulisevsky pieces, but that I performed. Okay, so interleaved versus block practice. So block practice is what we had been basically block practice is probably how we all have been practicing in the past. I'm going to work on this section for a long time. So she says, with blocked practice, you probably broke down your practice into smaller sections. You did repetitions to solidify the harder parts. You played it at a slower tempo, and then used various practice methods to work it up to speed. And then you gradually put it back together. And by the end of your practice session, was feeling solid. So let's see. Now think about what a lesson often looks like. You have to perform your piece in front of your teacher without stopping, trying to get it right for the first try. So that's asking your brain to do a very different thing. Essentially, you're performing, right? To play for your teacher is a kind of performance. So she's saying it's different. To actually perform is different than the kind of training you're doing when you're practicing. And she says, additionally, you have all this pressure and stress. High pressure. Oh, I got to do it right. This is so meaningful to me. I'm adding some stuff that's not there, but we all know that it's very stressful. And she says there's no wonder that it doesn't go correctly. It would be a miracle if it did go correctly, because she says here, I should have highlighted this. You're asking your poor brain to do something it never got practice to do. So how can we practice to improve our ability to perform the way we want to under pressure? The short answer is that we need to practice what our brains are going to have to do in a performance situation. So now she introduces this idea of interleaved, or random practice. So interleaved, we understand, essentially means random. And although she introduces, when she gets to the end of the chapter, she's going to tell us different ways to do it. So, interleaved practice is designed to train your brain to be nimble and adept at switching what it's doing and at reconstructing from scratch exactly how to play well on the first try. So, she's going to talk about this more in general, but basically, if we're practicing, I'm practicing here for half an hour. I've been practicing over the course of a week or a month or whatever, or a year. This piece, when I go to play it for myself after I've practiced it, I'm warmed up. And she has, what's the success bias or something like that? She talks about like how we kind of discount, we see things incorrectly, basically, which colors for the negative our ability to play something. We think we can play it better than we can. But it's very different. So what we need to do is we need to stimulate and simulate what it's like to play something, what I call cold, to play it cold, which is really all performance situations are that. It's play it cold. So when I'm rehearsing and performing, and this is easy for me to say. You guys saw my flaws that I made in that piece. So I'm not 100% perfect here because I didn't leave enough time for myself. But essentially what we need to do is we need to practice these performances. We need to practice doing it cold. And essentially where we play it, like when we're getting close to a performance, and when we pick up the accordion, so say we just start off the day, or even you've warmed up something and you're going to play your piece, boom, you put your accordion on. Oh, I warmed up a little bit, whatever thing you warm up, but you're not touching your song that you've been working on. The first time you play that is how it's going to be in a performance. And this is something that Fred Deschamps would tell me about all the time. He'd say, we're always building reflexes. That's what he would say, how he took, I'm sure that he's read many of these same studies. I can't see how he couldn't, being that he talks about so much of the same stuff. And he said, we're testing the reflex, test the reflex. So we need to do these practice performances to test the reflex as well as other things, but you're testing what is there, what's built, Okay, so the interleaved practice is designed to train your brain to be nimble and adept at switching between what it's doing and reconstructing from scratch exactly how to play well on the first try, that's what it is. The opposite of interleaved practice is known as blocked or masked practice, and that's how we practice most of the time. And so now she starts talking about, she basically is describing the interleaved practice, and I'll read the yellow here. So if you had these various excerpts, which she describes these classical pieces, Don Juan, Mendelssohn Scherzo, and a Beethoven piece, and if you just did one for 30 minutes and another one for 30 minutes and another one for 30 minutes, that would be an example of blocked practice. Interleaved practice would be if you switched between the excerpts every 5 minutes in a random order. And she'll tell us about that. So now we're going to get into studies that lead to her, that are supporting her argument and her advice that this is a great way to prepare for performance once things are learned. So she said, let's start with a study that's done with baseball players. The goal was to improve the baseball players' batting average. So that's how many balls they could hit when they were pitched to. So they had two groups. One did block practice. So they got 15 fastballs, 15 curveballs, and then 15 changeup pitches. And they had to hit as many as possible. And then the interleaved group was given 45 pitches total, which is how many the previous group, but they never knew what pitch was going to come at them. So they didn't know what to prepare for. Where the other one's like, okay, I'm getting in the routine. All right, here's another fastball. Here's another fastball. Okay, now we're switching to curveballs or whatever. Okay, now another curveball or whatever. Whereas the interleaved group was mixed up. Okay, so basically she says that like while they were doing it, the blocked practice group was doing way better. But then when they came back to have a performance test where I have it highlighted in pink 2 days later, the blocked practice group had made a 25. The interleaved practice group was 57% better, whereas the blocked practice group was only 25%, and that's what matters. And she says this later, which I'm sure I've highlighted, but she's like, you measure your practice by how you perform the next day, not by how you perform that day, which I think is also another, as Bertie said, mind-blowing. It's like, yes, that's it. It's all these things, like put that on my wall. the measurement of my practice is how I'm going to perform this tomorrow for the first time cold, essentially. Like, or how I'm going to literally perform. I don't know. I'm putting quotes, but I'm trying to say like perform, not just like play a few times and then go, oh, that's better. But like here it's cold and I'm playing it. And if it's better tomorrow, then yes. Okay. So, and then she has a graph to show that. And then she says why. So she talks about this. Uh, so she's interpreting the research of as far as and explaining to us like why it works. So she says another reason is something called contextual interference. Basically, the same skills hitting baseballs in a different combination interfere with each other in the brain. This makes it harder for the brain because it must switch rapidly between slightly different skills, hitting a fastball versus hitting a curveball, and then it must remember how to execute the different skills correctly in the moment. I think much like a flashcard or whatever. And I have been doing, and this is my advice for everybody, like learning everything in improvisation in jazz and swingland, is first you do the thing, blocked practice as an etude, like if it's a set of chords or an improvisation or whatever, and then you have to switch back and forth. And at the beginning, which this is really, this way is something that I have been doing, and I learned this from some jazz educators, people I took lessons with, and I continue to do as my main way to get things into my vocabulary, to learn them deeply. And it's the way that I teach people to do. And it's essentially, I forget what serial practice and then random practice, which she talks about at the end of the chapter. I have never thought of doing it with a set arrangement, which she's going to show later in the chapter. She's going to say, okay, take your piece and just either randomly switch between pieces and also randomly switch between sections rather. And that is going to drive things. That's going to teach your brain like, oh boy, I better just learn to do this with no warm up, no preparation, no going over it 10 times. I just got to do it perfectly, which is so cool. Okay, so that in the yellow here, if we want to perform well, our brains need to be adept at switching quickly between different skills and mindsets. So a lot of this, she talks about how essentially you're making it harder for yourself. That's what you're doing. And by making it harder, you're teaching your brain to overlearn, to learn better. All right. Much of the research on interleave practicing comes from athletes, like the baseball study. But does this also apply to practicing music? Fortunately, researchers are also testing this out in musicians. So she talks about a study, the pianists, where there was a special composition that was written just for this experiment, so they couldn't have known it. It was hard, so hard that it wouldn't be able to be sight read in the study, but not so hard that they couldn't practice it up. Pardon me, they couldn't, get better at it through practicing. And so they split the group into two sections, the block practice and then the interleave method. And she said, again, just like the bass players, the pianists perform the pieces and basically the same thing. During the practice, the blocked practicers were showing better, but then when they took a break of, let's see, does she say how long? I don't remember. 2 days later. Yeah, 2 days later, when they came back to perform it again, the interleaved practicers did way better than the blocked practicers did. So it really, I mean, this is like I keep quoting Birdie just to like make it fun and interactive with the chat. Which is like, it is mind blowing. Like I haven't really thought about my practice like this. Like the strategy that I'm trying to do is develop something to stick 2 days later or a month later or whatever. And like that in of itself might not be like, just holding that idea is not necessarily useful. But then when you say, okay, in order to do that, I have science and a technique to mix things up randomly to do that, then it's like, whoa, that really changes what I'm trying to do now. I'm not just trying to seem better at the end of my practice. It's okay if like I kind of feel like I'm not getting as far as I used to doing this new practice, because what I really am trying to do is just learn this thing for performance. It is really cool, really cool. Okay, so then she has this little kind of provocative thing. So she says, my favorite part of the experiment on pianists is what happened after the concert where they performed. The experimenters, this is in pink, the experimenters interviewed the performers and they asked them whether they thought blocked or interleaved practice was better.